Hello, I'm Dale Yurton, and welcome to a brand new study on fruit that lasts. This is actually a leadership study, and we're going to be looking at the transitions that happen in leadership. In fact, I'm entitling this first lesson, Leading Effective Transitions. Leading Effective Transitions. I'm going to use as a beginning text the Gospel of John, chapter 15, verse 16. Jesus said these words, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and anointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you." I want to emphasize that you bear fruit and that your fruit should remain. Now, because we know that all of life is a transition, we're all getting older. I've met no one that's getting younger. We're all getting older, and with age comes transition. So unless we are able to successfully transition whatever it is that God has called us to do, then our life will not be successful. In fact, when you look at the analogy of sports in games that men and women play, it's in the transitions where games are won or lost. In the transition, how well you're able to do that one runner can pass the baton to the next runner, that we're able to get the ball into the right hands so that they can score the winning points. That's where the game is won or lost. Now, the good news is God understands all of this, and he did not leave us without some answers. I've discovered that the Bible is filled with transitions, both good examples and bad examples. In fact, sometimes that's the beginning of knowledge, knowing what not to do. But the Bible gives us many, many examples of transition. Now, to set this lesson up, let me just talk about churches for a few moments. Let me ask you a question. How many growing churches do you know with pastors over 65 years of age? Just stop and think for a moment. There's nothing wrong with thinking. Anyone that can make you think is your friend. And I'm trying to be your friend today. How many churches do you know that have pastors that are over 65 years of age, that they're growing churches, that they are continuing to reach a younger generation? The truth is, not many. But we see the opposite so many times, where you have dying churches. That is not God's will, my friend. It never has been. God is a God of the living and not of the dead. So when you find a dead church, I'm not saying they're bad people. Many times they're good people. They're just people. But somebody has killed that church with bad decisions. Now, this is a common problem. I've seen it all over the world. In all the nations where I've traveled, I've seen similar cases of this. The problem basically goes back to we outgrow the ministry, or the ministry outgrows us. Either way, it's going to create problems. If we outgrow the ministry, then the ministry is not able to keep up with us. If the ministry outgrows us, then we're not able to keep up with the ministry. Either way, though, it becomes a problem for us. Now, an even worse case is both the minister and the ministry dying together. And we've all seen that happen, and it is a tragic mistake. What a sad mistake to see the leader is dying and he is killing whatever organization that he is the leader. He's killing it with him. And so I would challenge you Don't let the church die. It's your responsibility as a leader to find some answers, to look for answers. Somebody said, I don't know what to do. Then find someone that does. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do for you today, is just give you some practical advice here that will help you make some wise decisions so that the church will thrive and grow and live to the next generation, and so that we don't hurt people and bring about a premature death to the church. Again, one of the problems that every generation is going to face is what I would call the new versus the old. It's just a common problem. There's this generation gap, and we don't understand each other. The young people don't understand the old folks, and the old folks sure don't understand why the young people are acting the way they are today. Jesus addressed this in the Gospel of Luke, the 5th chapter of verse 39. Jesus said, "And no one, having drunk old wine, immediately desires new. For he says, the old is better." Oh, haven't we heard those words so many times? That you're talking to some of the mature people, those that are getting advanced in years, and they talk about the good old days. They always refer to the past as being good, and they don't like what they see in the present or where they're going. But the truth is, we are going somewhere. Life is a journey, and we're all on that journey of life. And it's learning how to make wise decisions for the future that's going to make the difference. Now, I'm not a wine drinker, so I'm just not speaking from experience. But something I have observed time and time again, with people are buying wine, what's the first thing they do when they pick the bottle up and they look at the brand, the label? They look for the date on the bottle. Why did they do that? Because as Jesus said, they say the old is better. The old wine is better. Now, talking about transition, let me give you the definition and the difference here, because there's a big difference between transition and change. Those are two distinctly different words. When we talk about change focuses on the destination. That's where we're going. And we point out the destination. We talk about the destination. That's the focus of change. Transition, no, it doesn't focus on the destination. Transition focuses on the journey and how to get there. There's a big difference here. And it's one of the problems that creates the difficulties of transitioning, us leading a successful transition. And so I'm going to share with you some guidelines, some thoughts, and some ideas that will help you to make wise decisions for the future. I'm going to give you 3 main points in this lesson to help you remember the things which I'm sharing with you. The first point that I want to talk about is balanced leadership. Now, that is very difficult to obtain because since life is a journey, the only way that we can get from here to there is we've got to walk, or sometimes we try to run. And that is going from a position when you're standing of balance to you kick yourself off balance, then stick out your leg, your foot to catch yourself before you fall. So walking is basically going from balance to imbalance to balance to imbalance, but we're making progress. We're going somewhere. The only way for us to stay totally balanced is not go anywhere. And that's not wise, because life is moving on. Life is transitioning. The world around us is changing. And unless we learn how to balance our leadership, we will soon be outdated, outmoded, and nobody will pay attention to that old man anymore. Now, there's two distinct types of leadership that you see in the Bible, two very different styles of leadership. They are anointings of God. They are gifts of God. The first one I will talk about is the prophetic principle. The prophetic principle. We need prophets. We need these that are able to see into the future. You read in Proverbs, the 29th chapter, and verse 18, where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint. But happy is he who keeps the law. The word revelation there could literally be translated prophetic revelation. The revelation is insight which God is giving to us. It is a spiritual vision. Where there is no revelation, the people cast off restraint. It's very important for us to have visionaries, people that are able to see where we're going, the change which is coming. It's important for these leaders to be involved in leading during the transition. Now, I know there are those that they don't want anything to change. They resist the change. But I'm telling you, my friend, that is an exercise in futility. There is no way you're going to be able to keep the world from changing. It is changing all around us. And as good leaders, we must lead during the transition. The Apostle Paul warns us of this in 1 Thessalonians 5:20. He says, do not despise prophecies. Oh, I've seen so many people that they don't like it. They don't want to hear about change. But that is a mistake, my friend. Change is coming either with us or without us. It is better if we lead during the transition. You can trace the low morale in a church. It can be traced back to a lack of prophetic vision. Without vision, the people perish. They lose heart. They cast off restraint. They don't care anymore. Someone has well said, with no vision, the people perish. But you can also say, with no people, the vision perishes. And that leads us to this second style of leadership. We need the prophets. We need the visionaries. We need what the Old Testament would call them seers. They're able to see something that other people don't see. But we also need a different style of leadership. It's what I would call the pastoral principle. In the Old Testament, they called them priests, but they serve in the same role. The prophets represent God, and they bring a word from God to us. The priests represent people. Pastors represent people, and they are the bridge from the people to God's presence. What we really need in the church is a balance between prophetic vision and pastoral care. You've got to have both to have a growing, thriving church. Without it, it's not going to last very long. See, prophets are visionaries. As I said in the Old Testament, they started out calling them seers. They see the vision and they have the desire to make progress. On the other hand, when you think about the priest and the pastors, they see the people and have a desire to take them with them. We need both of these. It's what I'm calling a balanced leadership. And every church needs both the prophetic and the pastoral to be able to lead through effective transitions. Now let me give you the second point in this lesson. If we're going to lead effective transitions, we need to examine the example of Jesus. Take a long look at Jesus. You're just not going to do it any better than what Jesus did it. He's the master. He's God in the flesh. He's the only one that never sinned. He got it right. And when it comes to transition, it's the same. Jesus was a master at leading transition. In fact, it was phenomenal, the transition that he led through. For instance, he leads from John the Baptist to Jesus, the Messiah. Do you realize what he's doing? He's leading from the Old Testament into the New Testament, from the Old Covenant into the New Covenant. That's a major transition. And then he doesn't just lead from the past, from John to himself. He leads from Jesus to the Holy Spirit. Or we could say from the synagogue in the Old Testament to the church in the New Testament. Jesus is the one that led us through that transition. What a major transition. This is giant steps forward. Now, one of the big mistakes that too many leaders make whenever a new generation of leaders come, it's very easy to blame the past for all your problems. You're making a mistake, my friend, a big mistake. It's the past that brought you here. You didn't build the platform where you're standing. Somebody else came before you and prepared the way. So it's a mistake to blame the past for all your problems. But on the other hand, don't become chained to the past. Now that's another mistake that I see is made, that too many of the older leaders, they want nothing to change. They want to be anchored to the good old days. Those days are gone, my friend. So either one is a mistake. To blame the past or to be chained to the past, you're making a mistake in both directions. Don't fall into that trap. Now here's the answer. The answer is the past does not have to be wrong for the future to be bright. We learn from the past, but we cannot live in the past. We have to be moving into the future. So we must learn from it. See, for us to despise our past, that's a terrible mistake. That's like despising our mother. You should show high respect for your mother, because without her, you would not have life. You would not even be here. So we show honor to our parents. But on the other hand, we can never go back and return to the womb. There's no way that we can re-enter our mother's wombs and be born again. It's not going to happen, my friend. We cannot live in the past. So we show respect for it, we show honor for it, but we cannot live there. Here's the way that you need to do. Look at the past like a seed bed. A seed bed that is planted seed for a future harvest. We're planting for the future. We're planning for what is ahead. Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 13 and verse 52 said, "Therefore, every scribe instructed concerning the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out of his treasure things new and old." We need both of them in our lives. We might say it's like maintaining the purity of the message while we're updating the methods of communication. The truth is the truth, but there's different ways we can express it. Now let me give you the third point I see in leading effective transitions, what I will call the pastoral voice. Everybody needs a pastor. Everybody. Even apostles need a pastor. And it's important that we hear the voice of the pastor to lead successful transitions. Remember, the pastoral heart is we want to take the people with us. The early church in the book of Acts, when you come to Acts, the 15th chapter, a big question arises, a big one, and it's ready to divide the church. The question can be summed up in these words. Could the Jerusalem church become a blended congregation? And what I mean by that was, up to this point, all the Christians had been Jews. They were all Jewish. And now suddenly Gentiles are hearing the gospel. Could the Jerusalem church become a blended congregation? Or we could say, did you have to be a Jew to become a Christian? Thank God they got it right. Thank God they found the right answer. And you'll find this in Acts the 15th chapter and verse 13. After they become silent, they're arguing and disputing about Jews and Gentiles. James answered, saying, Men and brethren, listen to me. Oh, thank God for James. Who is James? James was the pastor of the church in Jerusalem. Thank God for James and for his voice that helped them to be able to make the right decision. If they had not made the right decision, the church would have divided, and only God knows what would have happened to the Gentiles who had been rejected by the church in Jerusalem. So it shows that how important it is that we have pastoral leadership or the pastoral voice during the transition. One of the things that I have observed, because I've seen a lot of transitions that were not effective, they did not go well. They ended up hurting a lot of people. Churches split, people stopped going to church, and I've come to this conclusion that a transition can be right, but if it is not properly led, it can lead to failure. It's just as I mentioned, churches don't die. Somebody kills them with bad decisions. We need good pastoral leadership that is balanced with a prophetic voice. We know that's where we're going. We just got to figure out how we're going to get there. How are we going to make this transition from here to there? How are we going to successfully lead through? And these are some of the points that I'm going to be giving you in these lessons on transition. And so I want to close this lesson by talking about unity. Unity. Unity should be one of our main goals. If we don't keep the focus here on unity, whatever we can do to keep the church together. I've been meditating so much on that verse in 1 Peter, the 4th chapter and verse 7, where he says, the end of all things is at hand. Therefore it said, watch and pray always. But then he gives this word, and love one another fervently, because love covers a multitude of sins. Boy, we need that emphasis so strongly during times of transition. They are stressful times. They're difficult times because things are changing. Our world is changing. That is true. But we are following the God who is true. We are following the God who is truth. And even though generations come and generations go, the Word of God endures forever. We just have to learn how to speak it to a new generation. We just got to learn how to talk a new language, speak it in words that they can understand. And so I emphasize this so strongly that love, unity should be one of the main goals that we have in leadership. I love this verse of scripture in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, and verse 3. He says, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. He goes on in verse 13, and there he talks about the unity of the faith. But he begins with this, what he calls unity of the Spirit. And the way he introduces it is endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit. That word endeavoring means run after it. It means chase after it. You've got to give it everything, all your energy. You've got to pursue it. Run after it. That's what I intend to do to the end of my days. I'm going to be running after unity. Unity of the Spirit. Keep the right attitude. Keep the right spirit. Do not allow yourself to be caught up in petty quarreling and bickering over things that really don't matter. What's important is that we keep continuing to pass the baton from generation to generation. This is not a 100-yard dash. This is a marathon that we are running. And God has called us to run it successfully. We cannot run it alone. We've got to learn how to pass it on to the next generation so that they too will be able to run their race. And the day will come when they will have to pass the baton to even a younger generation. It can be done, but there must be the balance between the prophetic and the pastoral voice. Somebody has to speak for God. Someone must speak for the people.